Good afternoon. Thank you for your patience as we sort of gathered everybody here. And welcome to Finance de Mayo or something. I don't know. So with that being said, we are going to start with the Department of Education because they are here, like all good educators, on time, in their seats, and ready to go. And I love that about them, so we are going to start with them. And so with that, we will have, Mr. Yakovlev. Of course I had to pronounce that name. James, I can say that. I can say Liliana, I can say that. All right, when you all are ready, we'll wait for Mr. Mr. Leiser's like on slow. Remember that resume catcher I told you about? It's going downhill. All righty. When you are ready, go ahead, please.
I'm not sure who this Mr. Yakovlev individual is, but I'm more than happy to take it from here. Yuri Yakovlev, for the record. I'm joined by my colleagues, Ms. Camacho-Polco.
This is going to be a long hour.
Ms. Camacho-Polco and Mr. Malone will present the Joint Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Education CIP closing report for the Department of Education. The Joint Subcommittee completed its review of the Department of Education budget recommendations in the executive budget for the 2025-27 biennium. The closing recommendations of the subcommittee resulted in a decrease in general fund appropriations of $43.4 million in fiscal year 2026 and $26 million in fiscal year 2027 when compared to the governor's recommended budget, not including department-wide indirect cost allocation adjustments. The subcommittee recommended approval of the following closing actions. Office of the Superintendent, Budget Account 2673. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for total general fund appropriations of $194,920 over the 2025-27 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments for one new budget analyst position and associated operating expenses to support the pupil-centered funding plan and the work of the Commission on School Funding. The subcommittee did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for two new personnel technician positions to provide centralized human resource services, and instead recommended approval of one new personnel technician position within the Department Sports Services budget account funded with cost allocation revenues of $153,863 over the 2025-27 biennium. Furthermore, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for total general fund appropriations of $127,300 over the 2025-27 biennium, inclusive of technical adjustments to fund website migration and maintenance costs. The subcommittee did not provide a recommendation on the governor's request for one new unclassified deputy administrator position and instead deferred the decision to the Joint Full Money Committee. The position, as recommended by the governor, would oversee administrative, information technology, and facility functions for the department. However, the position would not be responsible for supervising any existing staff and would have an annual salary of $151,902, which is equivalent to the annual salary of the deputy superintendent position to which the incumbent would report. During the budget hearing on March 5th, 2025, the department indicated this new position would assist with the workload of the existing Deputy Superintendent of the Student Investment Division. Fiscal staff requested the department suggest a classified position that would be able to perform the duties of the recommended unclassified Deputy Administrator position. In response, the department indicated an Administrative Services Officer 4 position would provide an appropriate level of separation of supervisory duties. However, historically, Administrative Services Officer 4 positions are typically approved for larger departments such as the Department of Corrections, Department of Transportation, or Department of Health and Human Services. Alternatively, the Joint Full Money Committees may consider funding an Administrative Services Officer 3 position, which may be more appropriate given the size of the Department of Education. If the committees wish to approve an unclassified position with a lower salary level compared to the department's existing deputy superintendent positions, the committees may consider a Deputy Director of Administration position with an annual salary of $138,385. However, final decisions pertaining to unclassified salaries will be determined by the money committees when the 2025 pay bill is considered. In terms of the decision for the committees, along with associated operating costs, do the committees wish to, option A, approve one new unclassified deputy administrator position as recommended by the governor with an annual maximum salary of $151,902, or B, approve funding one new classified administrative services officer 4 position with an annual maximum salary of $144,511, or C, approve funding for one new classified administrative services officer 3 position with an annual maximum salary of $125,761,000, or D, approve one new unclassified deputy director of administration position with an annual maximum salary of $138,385, or E, not approve one new position for the Department of Education to assist with administrative, information technology, and facility functions. As previously noted, final decisions pertaining to unclassified salaries will be determined by the money committees when the 2025 pay bill is considered, and fiscal staff requests authority to enter any necessary technical adjustments.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions about this particular item? And with that, I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, there's a number of options that we have before us today. But as we look through them, and after the discussion that we've had during briefings on this matter, I would move that we go with option B and approve the funding for one new classified administrative services officer 4 position with an annual maximum salary of $144,511.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember Monroe Moreno. Second from Senator Wynn. Is there any discussion or questions about this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. Next budget is early childhood literacy and readiness, budget account 2621. So the subcommittee did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $70 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to fund pre-kindergarten seats and literacy programs. Instead, the subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $29.3 million in fiscal year 2026 and $47 million in fiscal year 2027 to fund pre-K seats based on the department's seat projections and the existing rate of $8,410 per seat. However, the subcommittee further recommended this funding be appropriated to the Office of Early Learning and Development budget account to consolidate pre-K funding, and that this funding be appropriated through the 2025 Appropriations Act with the intent to provide the funding on an ongoing basis. COVID-19 funding, budget account 2710. The subcommittee recommended not authorizing any federal elementary and secondary school emergency relief 3 emergency assistance to non-public schools and American Rescue Plan Act homeless children and youth program funding in fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027 due to the updated March 28, 2025 liquidation extension deadline by the U.S. Department of Education. However, the U.S. Department of Education indicates it may consider reapproving liquidation extension requests of the funding on a project-specific basis. Accordingly, the Department of Education would be required to submit a work program to request Revenue and Expenditure Authority if a liquidation extension request is reapproved in the future. District Support Services, budget account 2719. Although the governor recommended 3 new auditor positions to assist in conducting required pupil enrollment count audits of the data reported to the department quarterly by each school district and charter school, the subcommittee recommended approval of 2 new auditor positions and associated expenses funded with general fund appropriations of $374,631 over the 2025-27 biennium. Department Support Services, budget account 2720. The subcommittee recommended approval to update cost allocation reimbursement revenue based on legislatively approved expenses for the department and updated indirect cost allocation rate information from the U.S. Department of Education. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for one new management analyst position and associated expenses to assist with contract management, funded with reserve reductions of $191,153 over the 2025-27 biennium. Standards and instructional support, budget account 2675. Subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation of general fund appropriations of $219,523 over the 2025-27 biennium for one new education program supervisor position and associated expenses to support curriculum development and supervised staff. Educator licensure, budget account 2705. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for one new program officer position and associated operating expenses to oversee daily licensing activities funded with reserve reductions of $195,956 over the 2025-27 biennium. Educator effectiveness, 2612. The subcommittee recommended approval of budget amendment A2516-02612 to remove general fund appropriations of $250,000 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium for consideration as a one-time general fund appropriation of $500,000 provided through separate legislation. The appropriations are recommended to fund contracted studies by the National Center on Education and the Economy to support the work of the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. Office of Early Learning and Development, 2709. The subcommittee recommended funding state pre-K program seats at a rate of $8,410 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium, which is the existing per-seat rate approved by both the 81st and 82nd legislatures. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of eliminating expiring federal preschool development grant funds of $9.3 million in fiscal year 2027 and reducing federal child care and development block grant funds to $6.5 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium. Accordingly, the subcommittee did not recommend approval of contract authority of $459,717 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium for kindergarten assessments due to the reduction in federal grant funding. Furthermore, the subcommittee did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for federal preschool development grant funds of $92,112 in fiscal year 2026 and federal child care and development block grant funds of $112,665 in fiscal year 2027 to fund one new education and information officer position and associated operating costs to assist in the quality rating and improvement system program workload given the expiring and reduced federal grant funding. Safe and Respectful Learning, 2721. The subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $129,000 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to fund an increase in the annual licensing fee for the Safe Voice reporting system, which would provide for 2 additional threat assessment services. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to eliminate expiring federal school-based mental health services grant funding of $118,296 in fiscal year 2026 and $1.6 million in fiscal year 2027, along with various technical adjustments, and to eliminate one existing education program's professional position responsible for overseeing and administering the grants. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to eliminate expiring federal Now is the Time initiative grant funding of $114,388 in fiscal year 2026 and $1.8 million in fiscal year 2027, along with various technical adjustments, and to eliminate one existing education program's professional position responsible for implementing the grant-funded project Advancing Wellness and Resiliency in Education, an initiative to develop mental and behavioral health infrastructure in schools. Student and school support, 2712. Given the uncertainty regarding the availability of federal funding, the subcommittee recommended not approving the governor's recommendation for total federal grant funds of $964,051 to provide an online platform for the submission of improvement plans by low-performing schools and school districts, along with associated travel expenditures for staff to attend regional meetings in fiscal year 2026. Career and Technical Education, 2676. The subcommittee recommended approval of total general fund appropriations of $1.5 million in fiscal year 2026 and $1.6 million in fiscal year 2027, increasing the federal maintenance of effort for the Carl D. Perkins Grant. Account for Alternative Schools, 2672. The closing document prepared by fiscal staff for this budget account recommended it be closed as recommended by the governor, including directing the Department of Education to utilize private school license and fee revenue to fund any expenses in this budget account before expending general fund appropriations, along with a technical adjustment to correct non-state-owned office rent expenses with authority for fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary. However, the motion approved by the subcommittee did not align with the information provided within the closing document, as the motion provided direction to the Department of Education that limited the use of license and fee revenue to the private schools expenditure category. The fee revenue, which could be utilized for all purposes within the budget, should be utilized prior to the use of general fund appropriations. And so do the committees wish to approve directing the Department of Education to utilize private school license and fee revenue for all purposes within the account for alternative schools prior to expending general fund appropriations?
Thank you very much. And are there any questions about this item? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve directing the Department of Education to utilize private school license and fee revenue for all purposes within the account for alternative schools prior to expending general funds appropriations.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember Monroe Moreno. Second from Senator Nguyen. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Yuri Yakovlev for the record. Finally, the subcommittee recommended closing the following department budget accounts as recommended by the governor or as recommended by the governor with minor technical adjustments. Assessments and accountability, 2697. Data systems management, 2716. Gear Up, 2678. Parental involvement and family engagement, 2706. Literacy programs, 2713. Continuing education, 2680. And Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, 2715. Subcommittee also recommended approving technical adjustments noted by fiscal staff and authorized staff to make other technical adjustments to the Department of Education budget accounts as needed. And that concludes this report.
Thank you very much. Any questions on this? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to approve the stated items as stated by staff and authorize staff to make adjustments, technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember Monroe Moreno. Senator Nguyen, second. Any discussion on this motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much, and thank you all for all your work. We appreciate it. All right, we will move on to the Department of Transportation. Don't go very far, Ms. Camacho Poco. And when you are ready, you may go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. We've got Mr. Lizer passing again. He's practicing his job. Okay, when you are ready, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Liliana Camacho Poco, Fiscal Analysis Division, and I will be presenting the Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation Closing Report for the Nevada Department of Transportation. The Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation has completed its review of the Nevada Department of Transportation, NDOT, budget accounts. The closing actions taken by the members of the subcommittee have resulted in a decrease in highway fund authorizations of $3.7 million in fiscal year 2026 and $4.4 million in fiscal year 2027 when compared to the governor's recommended budget. Wildlife Crossings, budget account 4659, the subcommittee recommended approval of providing $1 million in expenditure authority in fiscal year 2026 for projects to design, construct, identify, restore, or protect wildlife crossings and other related highway features, and placing $4 million in the reserve category, which would generally require interim finance committee approval before it could be utilized and would allow the funds to balance forward each year over the 25-27 biennium. Bond construction, budget account 4663. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for the sale of $85 million in bonds pledged with highway fund revenue, the sale of $75 million in bonds pledged with fuel revenue indexing generated for the highway fund in Clark County, and interest earnings of $1.6 million in each year of the 25-27 biennium for construction projects. Transportation Administration, budget account 4660, the department calculated a targeted unrestricted highway fund balance of $152.8 million in fiscal year 2026 and $153.8 million in fiscal year 2027 to provide sufficient cash flow to cover operating and capital expenses. Based on the recommendations of the subcommittee for the NDOT budget accounts and updated Department of Motor Vehicles revenue projections provided in April of 2025, the projected unrestricted balance for the highway fund would be $149.6 million at the end of the 25-27 biennium, which is $4.2 million less than the department's fiscal year 2027 target. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation of $578.6 million in fiscal year 2026 and $578.7 million in fiscal year 2027 in the base budget for capital expenditures for various highway construction projects. The executive budget, as submitted, recommended 39 new positions for NDOT, which the governor later reduced to reflect a recommendation for only 19 new positions through the submission of Budget Amendment A25-474-4660 and Budget Amendment A25-488-4660. Of these recommended new positions, the subcommittee recommended approval of 2 new positions, one unclassified rural community specialist position and associated operating expenditures for total highway fund authorizations of $242,549 over the 25-27 biennium, and one personnel officer 2 position and associated operating expenditures for total highway fund authorizations of $274,795 over the 25-27 biennium. The subcommittee further recommended the department be directed to review its long-term vacant positions to determine whether they could be repurposed or reclassified for new staffing needs. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for a highway fund authorization of $18.5 million in fiscal year 2027 for the Beowawe Rest Facility improvements. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for highway fund authorizations of $7.9 million in fiscal year 2026 and $6.7 million in fiscal year 2027 for the continuation of upgrades for the department's statewide fueling system. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to modernize and enhance the IT systems used by the department, funded with highway fund authorizations of $21.6 million over the 25-27 biennium. These IT system enhancements include various geographic information system enhancements that would allow the department to streamline workflows and make data-informed decisions through mapping and analytics software. The subcommittee recommended providing fiscal staff with authority to enter technical adjustments to reflect the cost allocation revenue from fee-funded budget accounts to the NDOT Transportation Administration budget account to support a portion of the cost of the Nevada Shared Radio System replacement that would continue in the 25-27 biennium. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended approval of Budget Amendment A25-618-4660 to eliminate 2 positions and a technical adjustment to eliminate 1 additional position from the base budget, resulting in a total decrease in highway fund authorizations of $496,313 over the 25-27 biennium. Finally, the subcommittee recommended approval of all other closing items as recommended by the governor, with various technical adjustments and authority for fiscal staff to make additional technical adjustments as necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions on this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve the Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation closing report on the Nevada Department of Transportation and authorize staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember Monroe Moreno. Second from Senator Wynn. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much, and thank you. All right, with that, we will go on to the Department of Public Safety. Thank you. I know, I do too. All right, please go ahead when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Don Daralou, Chairman Earl Moreno, and members of the committee. I'm Tom Weber, Program Analyst with the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division, for the record. I will be presenting the Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation Closing Report for the Department of Public Safety. The Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation has completed its review of the Department of Public Safety, DPS, budget accounts for the 2025-2027 biennium. The closing recommendations of the Senate members of the subcommittee resulted in a decrease of general fund appropriations of $2.9 million in fiscal year 26 and $4.5 million in fiscal year 27, and an increase of highway fund appropriations of $3,161 in fiscal year 26 and $2,503 in fiscal year 27 when compared to the governor's recommended budget. The closing recommendations of the assembly members of the subcommittee resulted in a decrease of general fund appropriations of $2.1 million in fiscal year 26 and $3.8 million in fiscal year 27, and an increase of highway fund appropriations of $3,161 in fiscal year 26 and $2,503 in fiscal year 27 when compared to the governor's recommended budget. The following comments describe the more significant recommendations of the subcommittee. So for the Director's Office Budget Account 4706, the subcommittee recommended approval of one new IT manager position and the transfer in and funding source change of 4 positions to expand and restructure the Research and Planning Technology team, funded with cost allocation reimbursements of $504,134 in fiscal year 26 and $554,688 in fiscal year 27. However, it did not approve the governor's recommendation for an additional IT professional position. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for cost allocation reimbursements of $72,642 in fiscal year 26 and $90,572 in fiscal year 27 to fund one new background investigation technician position to support the public safety background unit, but did not recommend approval of one new digital media specialist position to assist with managing and expanding the department's online presence, as recommended by the governor. Furthermore, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for $3 million, $482,649 of which were general funds, $1.8 million in highway funds, and $738,117 in other funds over the 2025-2027 biennium to fund additional non-state-owned office rent costs due to the Department of Public Safety moving to a new office location on Bermuda Road in Las Vegas. For the Training Division budget account 3775, the subcommittee recommended approval of $358,365, $175,602 of which are general fund, $182,763 of which are highway fund, over the 2025-2027 biennium to fund one new DPS major position and associated operating costs to serve as chief of the Training Division, as recommended by the governor. However, the subcommittee did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation to fund one new training officer position to support the Training Division Southern Command, but instead recommended approval to fund one new program officer position to support the Training Division Southern Command. The subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $272,096 and highway fund appropriations of $283,202 over the 2025-2027 biennium to fund 2 new DPS sergeant positions to support an in-service training program within the Training Division, as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee also recommended approval of the governor's recommendation to transfer general fund appropriations of $1.5 million and highway fund appropriations of $1.6 million over the 2025-2027 biennium to transfer 8 DPS officer positions from the Training Division, including 4 to the Division of Parole and Probation and 4 to the Nevada Highway Patrol Division to allow for a rotating pool of DPS officer positions to serve as training officers. For public safety one-shots, budget account 4730, the subcommittee recommended approval of budget amendment A251884730 to eliminate general fund appropriations of $420,463 in each year of the 2025-2027 biennium for a recruitment campaign targeting the department's DPS officer and public safety dispatcher classifications, to instead consider the recommendation through the bill process as a one-time general fund appropriation. For Nevada Highway Patrol Division, budget account 4713, the subcommittee recommended approval of highway fund appropriations of $68,552 in fiscal year 26 and $84,636 in fiscal year 27 to establish one new program officer position to serve as manager for the Nevada Highway Patrol's tow program, as recommended by the governor. The subcommittee recommended approval of a new program officer position to be funded with fee revenue transferred from the DPS Ignition Interlock non-executive budget account totaling $84,636 in fiscal year 27, and to change the start date of the program officer position to July 1st, 2026. The subcommittee further recommended approval of a letter of intent directing the agency to provide a status update on the implementation of the Ignition Interlock program, including its progress on finalizing regulations and establishing the fees necessary to support the program. Highway Safety Grants Account, budget account 4721, the subcommittee recommended approval of $511,598 in fiscal year 26 and $601,730 in fiscal year 27 in Federal Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program grant funding to establish 6 new commercial vehicle safety inspector positions to support the agency's commercial enforcement section, as recommended by the governor. For Investigation Division, budget account 3743, the subcommittee did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations to fund 6 new positions to support digital forensics in cold case operations. Instead, the subcommittee recommended approval of 1 new DPS sergeant position and 2 new program officer positions funded with general fund appropriations of $434,497 in fiscal year 26 and $403,200 in fiscal year 27. However, the subcommittee concurred with the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $139,231 in each year of the 2025-2027 biennium to fund license agreements for software utilized in digital forensics investigations, and recommended approval of the transfer of 1 DPS officer position and general fund appropriations totaling $217,163 in fiscal year 26 and $216,545 in fiscal year 27 from the Division of Parole and Probation to the Investigation Division to support digital forensics in cold case operations, as recommended by the governor. The Investigation Division budget account had a closing difference related to the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $679,919 in fiscal year 26 and $701,497 in fiscal year 27 to fund 1 new DPS sergeant position and 4 new DPS officer positions to establish an illicit cannabis unit. The Senate members of the subcommittee did not recommend approval, while the Assembly members of the subcommittee recommended approval. So options for the committee's consideration, 1, concur with the Assembly and approve general fund appropriations totaling $679,919 in fiscal year 26 and $701,497 in fiscal year 27 to support 1 new DPS sergeant position and 4 new DPS officer positions to establish an illicit cannabis unit as recommended by the governor. Or option 2, concur with the Senate, not approve the governor's recommendation of general fund appropriations totaling $679,919 in fiscal year 26 and $701,497 in fiscal year 27 to support 1 new DPS sergeant position and 4 new DPS officer positions to establish an illicit cannabis unit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. Are there any questions on this item? Assemblymember Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a question for staff. So this would be a brand-new unit that we do not currently have, so all new positions, correct?
Thank you for the question, Chairman Moreno. Tom Weber for the record. That's correct. These are new positions, and this would be a new task force.
Thank you for that answer.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Members of the Assembly, there was a difference in the subcommittee between the Senate and the Assembly. And I'll remind everyone that we've been very deliberate in not expanding or creating new positions. So it would be my recommendation as Chair of Ways and Means to have a reconsideration from the Assembly side. So we have a motion from Assembly Member Watts, a second from Assembly Member Brown May for a reconsider of the Assembly Subcommittee's vote. Any discussion on that motion? Not seeing any for the Assembly members. All in favor of reconsideration of the subcommittee vote? Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. And then would you please make a motion?
Thank you. And with that, Madam Chair, on this, I would motion that we not approve the governor's recommendation for the general fund appropriations totaling $679,919 for FY26 and $701,497 for FY27 to support one new DPS sergeant position and 4 new DPS officers positions to establish a new illicit cannabis unit.
No, first. So moved. So moved.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I believe the Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno made the motion.
We don't need to vote on this.
You already voted on it, though.
That's just a recommendation, though.
Second by Senator Nguyen. And with that, is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And we'll go on.
Thank you, Chair Dondera-Loop. For traffic safety, budget account 4687, the subcommittee recommended approval of transferring all revenues and expenses totaling $28.6 million over the 2025-2027 biennium to the Highway Safety Planning and Administration budget account and eliminating the traffic safety budget account as recommended by the governor. For Nevada Office of Cyber Defense Coordination, budget account 4704, the subcommittee recommended approval of the transfer of the Nevada Office of Cyber Defense Coordination from the Department of Public Safety to the Office of the Chief Information Officer and the provision of a general fund loan to support the activities in the Nevada Office of Cyber Defense Coordination budget account over the 2025-2027 biennium, contingent upon approval of enabling legislation, including a one-time general fund appropriation loan. The subcommittee further recommended the issuance of a letter of intent directing the agency to report to the Interim Finance Committee by July 1st, 2026 on progress made in obtaining a customer base and developing a sustainable rate or assessment for the Nevada Office of Cyber Defense Coordination. For Division of Parole and Probation, budget account 3740, the subcommittee recommended approval of utilizing caseload projections developed by an independent contractor received in March 2025, and also recommended approval of an updated methodology for determining staffing ratios as proposed by the agency. In total, recommendations related to caseload resulted in general fund reductions totaling $4 million and increases of $1.2 million in county reimbursement revenue over the 2025-2027 biennium. The subcommittee also recommended approval of 2 new administrative services officer positions to support the court services unit, funded by general fund appropriations of $178,787 in fiscal year '26 and $228,444 in fiscal year '27, as recommended by the governor. Furthermore, the subcommittee did not recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $254,037 in fiscal year '26 and $217,471 in fiscal year '27 to fund 1 program officer position and contractual costs to support the issuance of citations as recommended by the governor. For the Central Repository for Nevada Records of Criminal History, budget account 4709, the subcommittee recommended approval of a budget policy restricting the total amount of general fund appropriations made to the Criminal History Repository budget account, totaling 23% of the revenue supporting the budget account, excluding ongoing operational costs of the Nevada Criminal Justice Information System, also known as NCJIS, to apply to the agency beginning in fiscal year '27. This option would decrease general fund appropriations by $2.5 million and increase fee revenue by the same amount in fiscal year '27, and would require the agency to research and implement adjustments to fees charged beginning July 1st, 2026. The subcommittee also recommended the issuance of a letter of intent directing the agency to provide a semi-annual report to the Interim Finance Committee on its progress in developing a fee structure to generate 77% of funding supporting the budget account, excluding ongoing operational costs of the NCJIS in alignment with a 23% cap on general fund appropriations beginning in fiscal year '27, with the first semi-annual report due December 31st, 2025. The subcommittee also recommended approval of general fund appropriations totaling $3.7 million in each year of the 2025-2027 biennium to support ongoing license and maintenance costs of the Nevada Criminal Justice Information System, including Budget Amendment A251804709, which removed $866,832 in general fund appropriations in fiscal year '26 intended for one-time consulting costs. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended a budget policy restricting the total amount of general fund appropriations to support ongoing license and maintenance costs of the Nevada Criminal Justice Information System, totaling 23% of associated expenses, to apply to the agency beginning in fiscal year 2028. The subcommittee also recommended adding to the letter of intent a provision to include fee increase recommendations to support ongoing license and maintenance costs of the Nevada Criminal Justice Information System. The subcommittee did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation to transfer 2 business process analyst positions and 1 accounting assistant position from the Criminal History Repository to the DPS Director's Office, and to retain 4 positions previously assigned to the NCJIS modernization project in the Criminal History Repository. Instead, the subcommittee recommended transferring general fund appropriations of $930,363 in fiscal year '26 and $940,620 in fiscal year '27 to transfer 7 business process analyst positions, 1 accounting assistant position, and associated operating costs from the Criminal History Repository budget account to the DPS Director's Office budget account, consistent with the agreement made with the agency during the 82nd 2023 legislative session, in which it would submit a request to transfer the remaining 7 NCJIS modernization staff to the Director's Office Research and Planning Technology team in fiscal year '26 upon completion of the NCJIS modernization project. So for the Records, Communications, and Compliance budget account 4702, the subcommittee did not recommend approval to continue to fund 4 administrative assistant positions, and instead recommended approval of cost allocation reimbursements of $173,044 in fiscal year '26 and $170,362 in fiscal year '27 to continue to fund 2 administrative assistant positions to support public safety dispatcher positions. For the Fire Marshal, budget account 3816, the subcommittee recommended approval of fee revenue of $195,930 in fiscal year '26 and $153,549 in fiscal year 27 to fund one new DPS officer position to support fire and explosion investigation activities for the State Fire Marshal in Carson City. The subcommittee also recommended approval of fee revenue of $120,711 in fiscal year 26 and $91,932 in fiscal year 27 to fund one new fire and life safety inspector position and associated operating costs to support the State Fire Marshal's fire inspection activities in Northern Nevada. The subcommittee also recommended approval of transfer and fee revenue of $216,287 in fiscal year 26 and $176,661 in fiscal year 27 to fund one new administrative assistant position as recommended by the governor with a revised start date from July to October 2025 and one new training officer position to support the State Fire Marshal's Fire Service Training Bureau. So on page 10, furthermore, to manage the financial operations of the State Fire Marshal, the subcommittee recommended approval of transfer and fee revenue of $92,273 in fiscal year 26 and $113,694 in fiscal year 27 to fund one new administrative services officer position as recommended by the governor with a revised start date from July to October 2025. The subcommittee recommended closing the following DPS budget accounts as recommended by the governor with or without technical adjustments and provided authority for fiscal staff to make technical adjustments as necessary. So Office of Professional Responsibility, budget account 4707, Evidence Vault, budget account 4701, Forfeitures Law Enforcement, budget account 4703, Dignitary Protection, budget account 4738, the NHP Canine Program, budget account 4705, Child Volunteer Background Checks Trust Account, budget account 4710, State Emergency Response Commission, budget account 4729, Cigarette Fire Safety Standard and Firefighter Support, budget account 3819, Capitol Police, budget account 4727, and Highway Safety Planning and Administration, budget account 4688. On page 11, Motorcycle Safety Program, budget account 4691, Justice Grant, budget account 4736, Justice Assistance Act, budget account 4708, Justice Assistance Grant Trust Account, budget account 4734, Account for Reentry Programs, budget account 4737, and Parole Board, budget account 3800. So this concludes the subcommittee report. Thank you, Chair Dondero-Loop.
And thank you for all that work. Are there any questions on this particular item? Not seeing any. I'll take a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to approve the Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation's closing report on the Department of Public Safety, and also provide authority for fiscal staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember Monroe Moreno. Thank you, Senator Wynn, for your second. Are there any discussions on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. All right. We will not be doing the Treasurer's Office or the capital improvement tonight. Those will come at a later time. So with that, that brings us to our last agenda item today, public comment. For those of you providing public comment, please remember to state and spell your name for the record and then begin your statement. To call in to provide testimony during the public comment period, please dial 888-475-4499. When prompted for the meeting ID, please enter 853-2813-9780 and then press pound. When prompted for a participant ID, please press pound. The call-in information is also provided on the agenda today. I do not see anyone here in Carson City, nor do I see anyone in Las Vegas. So we will move immediately to the phone lines. AVH, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to offer public comment today, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. There are no callers wishing to offer public comment at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, that completes our agenda today. I'd like to thank everyone for being here all day long and for Finance After Dark. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.